Hey, what's up guys, Alex here. Thank you for checking this video and welcome to the episode number 62 of the series of tutorial on how to build a premium theme for WordPress. Welcome again. In this tutorial we're gonna style, finally we're gonna style completely our contact form. So in the previous lesson we left pretty much with a fully functional contact form with all the features and functions that are necessary to use it on a production ready website. Right now, of course, it looks kind of ugly, it doesn't look style, and it's kind of okay if you're planning to release this as an external plugin and let the user stylize or like customize the look of this contact form. But I designed the contact form in the Sunset theme PSD file that you downloaded at the beginning of this series. So if you notice here, it kind of looks way different. So we're gonna style this contact form in this way, and we're gonna use all these elements here to have a kind of a better look or better visual look of responsive feedback for the user itself. So let's start. Let's access our code editor, and first of all we have to edit all the input fields, because right now are by default getting the form control class of Bootstrap. That it's totally fine. That class I always suggest, if you're using Bootstrap as your default CSS framework, always use the default classes of Bootstrap because they solve a lot of issues with cross-browser compatibility with Internet Explorer, Firefox, Google Chrome, and so on. So let's leave this class by default and let's add on top our custom classes. So let's select all the form control input fields that we want to stylize, and then let's write Sunset form control. So we're gonna have this new class here that we're gonna copy and we're gonna put in here inside the section contact form inside our sunset.scss file and sunset form control. Then another class that I want to add is to the button that by default is button default. So if we take a look at the front end here, of course we have the button aligned to the left and is the default style of Bootstrap. In the design I have the button to the center, a really big blocky button, and of course it's bigger, there's more padding and stuff like that. So first, to align a button to the center, let's just simply wrap the button around a paragraph or a div container. In my case, I'm going to use a div because by default a div has display block of type of attribute. So let's use the default class of Bootstrap text center, and then let's close everything here inside this div. So also all the messages and all the confirmation messages, errors, and submissions messages are going to be central aligned, so we maintain this style consistent. Here we're going to use the button LG. That should be another default class of Bootstrap. So if we refresh right now, we should have this bigger button aligned to the center, and that's perfect. And now let's create another button sunset form to have this wonderful button that now we can style. So let's go back here in the sunset.css and let's add also these other class button sunset form. And let's start from the button. So accessing here, we have the background color that it's 656565, and I don't know if we have the variables defined. So if we access the SAS folder and we have variables here, we don't have a 6565, so let's use another type of variable called simply gray. Then we don't have it. Let's define the color of our button. Let's save it. So let's copy this variable, and inside here for the button, let's say background color, our new variable. I'm deliberately using background color because I don't want to override any other background settings if there are like background images or background position or stuff like that. If you have to edit just the background color, I strongly suggest you to not use background, because this background is going to override all the other background settings that the default class of Bootstrap should have or could have. So let's always point to only the specific type of attribute that we want to override. Then we want to convert the border radius to 2 pixel, that is the radius that we're using, and then we need to increase the font size to 26 pixel. And because we're already here, let's check all the distance. So inside Affinity Designer, I can hold the command option, but you can do it also in Photoshop, of course, and you can see the distance of this button. So we can update the padding. Here we have 60, it's 60.3, but let's round the number to 60. Here we have 13 or 14, so let's use 14. So we're gonna have a slightly bigger distance and the button should be fine. So let's go back in our code editor and let's say font size 26 pixel and then padding 14 pixel on top and 60 pixel to left and right. So with the padding, if we specify only 2 attributes, automatically the top is going to be used for the bottom as well, and the right value is going to be used for the left value as well. Let's save it. Let's go back in our front end. Let's refresh, and now we have this button. Of course, we have to change a little bit of colors because this is kind of ugly. So let's change these to color white, better, but then we have to do another quick fix, that is the font weight, and we want our font weight to be 100. So really light, really thin font weight, and that's perfect. Now we could implement a little bit of things, another like couple of things. First, I want to remove the border. Border none. So we're going to remove it completely and shouldn't have it. And then I want to implement a different type of rollover. And also I want to have an animation. So now it's just like hovering completely. I want to animate this so I can use the mixins to create the transition. I should have already a mixin here for the mixing animate with the attribute and the time. That's perfect. So we're going to use this to say that the button sunset form should include the animate mixin to animate all the attributes at 320 milliseconds, and comma to separate the 2 attributes. Let's go back in the front end, let's refresh, and now our transition is animated. Now I want to change the rollover effect because of course this gray is kind of too light, it kind of disappears, so I want to have like sort of transition to black and maintain the color white. So we can simply do it by still using SAS and specifying the ampersand attribute of hover and also ampersand attribute of focus, because both of these attributes of both these statuses of the button are style. We want to use a background color of, let's see, in our variables what we have. Let's use the dark gray because it goes to the default color that we're using for the background of the sidebar, so it's more consistent. And then we can maintain the color to white. Let's save it. Let's go back in our front end. Let's refresh. And now we have the animation that we want. That's good. And here, of course, we have this other status that Bootstrap applies automatically, that if we hold and press is the active status. And we can style also this one if you want, but I kind of like it having these 2 type of different animations. So we know when we're clicking, and this is going to be also activated when someone taps on mobile. But that's perfect. Right now we have our button that is styled like in the design. Now it's time to take care of our form. First of all, let's create a little bit of space in this contact form that it's really cluttered and clamped. So inside here in the form, we can activate or use a class called sunset contact form that shouldn't be used anywhere. Correct. And let's use it at the beginning of everything because it's the first class of the form that wraps everything. And here we can define a padding of 20 pixel and then 0. And let's refresh. And now, oops, I did something wrong in the contact form here. Oops, I closed it. Sorry guys, you shouldn't close the form. That's perfect. A little bit of more space. Let's add it a little bit more. So let's say go to 40 pixels and let's create a little bit more breathing room. Perfect. Now another thing, I want to increase the spacing in between the form groups, because now by default the form groups of Bootstrap have a margin bottom of 15 pixels. But if I want to add it to, for example, let's say 30 pixel. Yeah, I like it more. It's more spacious, there's more space, so it's good. I like it. But the thing is that I don't want to edit the form group class for all the forms, because if I do this new style is going to affect all the form groups inside the website. And if the user is using other contact form or other form groups around probably the sidebar or in another page, this style is going to affect also those form groups. So I don't want to do that. I want to affect only the style inside the contact form, so I can stay inside the contact form and specify the class form group and say that the form group inside the contact form has a margin bottom of 30 pixel, and that's perfect. Let's refresh. And that's awesome. Now only the form groups inside the contact form are styled. So here also in the design we have the form that is center aligned, but of course all the text is left aligned, but we have a maximum width that it's kind of the same width of this container. So we don't want to go 100% like it's doing right now, because it looks, of course, it looks kind of weird too wide. So let's limit these to a max width, and then let's center align this contact form. To do that, it's really simple. This contact form, we can specify a max width of, for example, 500 pixels. If we specify a max width to an element, of course, this element is going to be stop, it's going to wrap around, it's going to have a max width of 500. But if we go in responsive, this element has to shrink and respect the size of the container, and it's actually doing it. To avoid future problem, to avoid issues that a different browser could interact differently with this form, always specify the default width that has to be at 100%. So we're saying that this container has a width of 100%, but a maximum width, a maximum size of 500 pixels. So span completely for the length or the width of the page, but don't go over 500. To center in a line, there's this beautiful trick that is the default CSS attribute to specify a margin left and right auto. So sometimes you could find something like margin 0 auto. This margin 0 auto, what it's doing is basically saying that the top and bottom have to be a margin value of 0, and the margin right and left of this container have to be aligned automatically. So they have to be auto aligned from the left and right margin of the browser or another container. This code will force an element that has a default, a defined width of a predefined preset width or max width attribute to center align to the page, in the page. So let's refresh, and now we have our form that is center aligned with margin left and right auto and a max width of 500 pixels. And if we scroll down, or if we reduce the size of our container, here automatically the form is not gonna go over. Even if this is smaller than 500 pixels, we are at 290 pixels, this form knows that has to respect the 100% of the width of the container, of the width of the browser, and not go over that. But of course, if we increase it, it's gonna go over 500 pixel and it's gonna stop growing, and that's perfect. Another thing that I want to solve, I want to remove these resizing option that has a default attribute of the HTML text area element. So let's remove this thing because it's really ugly. Maybe we should leave it only vertically and not horizontally. So it's kind of a nice feature to be able to expand the form, especially if you expand the text area, especially if you're writing a long message. So let's leave this option, but not the horizontal option. To do that, it's really simple, and we can use the sunset form control, so automatically all these options are going to be applied to every element that comes with this class. To do that, let's simply specify the CSS attribute called resize, and here we can specify different things. We can say none, or we can say both if we want to just leave it by default resizable in both direction, but I want to just leave it resizable to vertical and not horizontal. So let's save it. Let's go back in our front end. Let's refresh, and now we still have this, but if I try to click and drag it to the side, it doesn't grow horizontally, only vertically, and that's perfect. If you decide to deactivate this, you can totally do it by say simply none, and automatically your sidebar will not have the ability to resize. Of course, if you write a lot of things, you're gonna have these really annoying scroll bar inside the sidebar. So if you decided to deactivate completely the resize function, the resize feature of the text area, I suggest you to increase the height of the text area a little bit more, just to have a little bit more breathing room. So something like, you could give it a 300 pixel of a height, so even, or maybe it's too much, but you know what I mean, at least like having a clear area to write and not be cramped inside a really short and small annoying area. But let's keep going. Now let's style these form control, all this stuff, and we want to remove pretty much all the styling of this thing, but we want to leave just the border bottom like we did here. But in reality, this is not the border bottom, because I want to use this to animate it, to create kind of a nice interaction or like UI feedback for the user. So I'm going to use this as a pseudo element. So my goal right now is just completely remove all the elements of the UI, everything, and keep this contact form completely clean. So let's do it by, first of all, removing the border and say none, and then the border radius, let's say 0, and then let's increase a little bit the padding to this thing, so I can have 8 pixel padding, and then 15 pixels padding, and then let's remove the outline, say none, and let's see what we did here. Let's save it, let's go back in our front end, let's refresh, and now it's pretty clean. But of course you notice something, I don't know if you can see it from the recording, but there's a slightly box shadow here, and then when we select or we go on focus and we activate, we have this box shadow outline. So that's what we have to do again. First of all, when you style this thing and you want to see how the class interacts and how the class change, you can activate both on Firefox and Google Chrome, and I think also in Internet Explorer or Microsoft Edge. You can right click on an element and activate the hover status, or right click and activate the active status, or in our case activate the focus status. So you can see we activated the focus status of a specific element by not clicking on top, but activating the focus from these options. And right now, because we have this option activated, you notice that the class changed here and you're seeing what's happening. So on form control focus, we have a border color, but we don't care because we removed the border. The outline is 0, but then we have the box shadow. So we have to remove the box shadow and deactivate it completely. And also by default, we have to deactivate the box shadow that the form control comes with. So let's do box shadow none, and then let's say on hover and ampersand on focus and ampersand on active, want the box shadow to none. Let's save it, let's go back in our front end, let's refresh. Now everything looks pretty super clean. So if we go roll over here and we click and we activate it, we write something, we don't see anything, but of course if you can keep scrolling, you see that if we selected, this is the actual size of the form, and that's perfect. Now it's time to style our custom. First of all, let's implement this placeholder in the way that we decided before, or we decided in the design. So we have all the placeholders are uppercase with a font size of 11. So in order to style the placeholder, we have to use some pseudo elements, pseudo classes of the native browsers, and we have to specify them one by one. Unfortunately, it's not like that easy or like that simple, that intuitive, but in order to do that, we can create each pseudo element for each browser, and in our case, of course, we have just like 4 different declarations, so it's kind of okay. We can use the ampersand, double column, and then dash WebKit input placeholder, open and close the brackets, and then text transform uppercase. And we have to repeat this declaration for every other browser. So let's duplicate it 4 times. And the first one is not WebKit anymore, but it's just mods placeholder. The second one is for Microsoft, Internet Explorer, and below, and it's MS placeholder, and the Microsoft is just one single column, and the other one is still mods, so for Firefox, but with one single column with all the versions lower than number 18. So let's save it and let's see if it actually worked. Let's refresh, and now we have our placeholder that we're forcing it to be uppercase, but of course, because we styled only the placeholder, we're not forcing this style to be applied to the text of the user, only the placeholder. So let's keep styling it by adding the pseudo element at the bottom. First, we cannot have a pseudo element to an input file because an input field doesn't have a closing input attribute, so we cannot have any pseudo element in between. It's like an auto closing type of HTML markup. So in order to style a good pseudo element, we're gonna use the form group class that wraps everything, and that's perfect because we already defined the form group custom class inside the sunset contact form. So let's style this as a position relative, and then let's declare that ampersand before this thing, we're gonna have a position absolute element with a display type of block, and then a content empty, and then we can do a bottom has to be 0, and we're gonna style this like later better, but let's say left it's gonna be 0 and right it's gonna be 0, and then we're gonna give it a height of 2 pixel, then a background color of gray. Save it. Let's go back in the front end. Let's refresh. Okay, it's kind of similar, but super weird. So let's check this color if we have it. CB. Let's go back in our code editor variable. We have the color, so let's duplicate this. Let's give it another color, and let's use it another type of light gray, but grayish. Let's say gray 2. And this is kind of the problem when we're using mixing variables and we have like different variation and different type of gray. You end up trying to find a type of like naming light gray, lighter gray, super light gray, almost white, or grayish, gray 2, gray 3, darker gray, and all this type of stuff. So it's kind of weird, but of course you can find your own method and you can find your own solution to this problem. And it's not really a problem, but that could be if you have a lot of different grays derivation. But at that point you could use like the ASCII code as the name of the variable. But anyway, background color gray 2. Let's go back in the front end, let's refresh, and now that's better. Okay, now we have this situation, and it's awesome. It's kind of like it adds where everything we want. Here now we want to give feedback, a better input to our user, because if we try to submit, of course we're gonna have your name is required. And of course it looks kind of weird. So let's style a little bit. So first, if we have an error message, I want to color this border by red, and this has to be all uppercase, really small, and yeah, in this position is fine. So let's style this a little bit. Let's go back in our code editor here. Let's check the hierarchy, or like the HTML markup. So we have the form group, and inside the form control message that we can style. So this is perfect. And inside here we have the form group, and then form control message. That could be here. Form control message. We can give text transform of uppercase as well, and then we can give it font size of maybe 9 pixel if it's readable enough. We're gonna check later. But now we can do something, because of course, as we were using with jQuery the default type style of Bootstrap to control the visibility of these error messages, this stuff, we have this custom class that we're using that has error applied to the form group. And that's perfect. We can detect when form group as a class of has error, and we can change all the elements inside this div container. And that's perfect. So here in the form group, we can check if this class ampersand dot has error, And basically what we're doing here, we're saying that if the form group also has a class of hasError, what we're gonna do, we're gonna change the before styling to have background color of red if we don't have a red variable. Okay, we don't have a red variable, so we're gonna use just simply red. Let's save it, let's go back here, let's refresh and let's check submit. Your name is required. That's perfect. So here we can change a little bit. First of all, let's use the same color of Bootstrap because I like it. Is the text danger like this? And of course, because we are inside Bootstrap, we could, instead of manually grabbing this, we could extend that type of color, that type of variable, but we already have Bootstrap all compiled, so we cannot really do it with tests. But anyway, that's an option. And also I want to change these to 10 pixel and I want to use a font weight of 300. If it's not readable enough, let's refresh. Okay, it's not really readable. This your name is required. It's kind of weird. So let's give it maybe a bold text. No, okay, 500. 500, it's better. 500 looks good. Save it. That's perfect. And here you can see we have a small box shadow because there's a WebKit declaration inside here, and we have also these type of outline that I really hate it. I don't like it. So let's remove also this by activating once again the focus status here, and let's see that the form control has error as a box shadow. So let's remove completely everything by saying that the sunset form control as a box shadow none, and these has to be important. So it doesn't matter if other classes, other declaration, they have the same. These has to be important box shadow none, and we want to duplicate this to remove the WebKit declaration as well. Let's refresh it and let's submit. Perfect. We don't have the box shadow anymore. If we go rollover, it's not red anymore. We don't have the outline, and that's awesome. So let's submit. Again, try to send a message, Alex, me@allegat.com. This is a test message, and submit. Submission in process. Please wait. All disabled. That's perfect. Message successfully submitted. Thank you. And this is awesome. This is way better. Of course, the last thing that we're missing is this icon, but you can put just a really simple image, or you can use the icon on top and you can style this form however you want. But this is a really simple tutorial to show you how to use a couple of classes on top of Bootstrap, because the main issue that I found in other developers while they're using Bootstrap is they don't use Bootstrap in a way that it's supposed to be. They don't build on top of Bootstrap, and they try constantly to fight against Bootstrap, against its default class and against its default declaration, instead of using them to quickly style and just update a couple of small CSS declaration to customize the experience. So it's pretty much it for today's lesson. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please give it a thumbs up or subscribe to my channel. And if you want, you can spend a couple of minutes to check the support me page on my website, where you can find all different ways and methods to support me, support my channel, and help me to do better videos and better tutorials for you. Thank you again, guys, and until the next lesson, as usual, happy coding!